It's almost like a badge of honor. Like if you don't come home with stained clothes, you didn't do it right. Like you haven't played hard enough. So I think our philosophy has always just been that like clothes can be washed and so can kids. So just let them play.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Screen Less, Play More. I am Cynthia, the founder of ScreenLessPlayMore.com. And I think a lot of us just parent the same way our parents did things, and we don't realize that there's a completely different way of looking at child rearing. My guest today, Linda Åkeson McGurk, grew up in Sweden and then moved to the US and got to see firsthand how differently American parents do things from Swedish parents, and honestly, how we do things different than most of the world. In Hunt Gather Parent, Micheline Duclef points out that parents in the U.S. are the weird outliers. Most of the world does things one way, and we do it differently in the U.S. And Linda is the author of There's No Such Thing as Bad Weather, a Scandinavian mom's secrets for raising healthy, resilient, and confident kids. And she has a website called The Rain or Shine Mama and an excellent Substack called The Open Air Life. So welcome, Linda.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Am I saying your last name correctly? Akeson?
It's more like Åkeson, but that's hard for Americans to pronounce. That letter with A with a ring over it doesn't really exist in the English alphabet. So
yes, I know probably 3 Swedish words, so I will not even attempt that. I will slaughter it.
It's okay. Akeson works too. No big deal.
So you grew up in Sweden, but then you had your children in Indiana. When you first moved to Indiana, what were the most striking differences you saw between Middle America and Sweden, especially in terms of how we raise our kids?
There is sort of this consensus that children really need outdoor play and that nature is an essential part of childhood. Mm-hmm. And at school or preschool, if we were complaining about the weather, the teachers would just tell us, there's no such thing as bad weather, only bad clothes. And you were sent out to play anyway. And then I married an American and moved to the US, and I had my first daughter in Indiana. And this is 17 years ago now. And I noticed right away that the culture that I was used to, there was a bit of a culture clash because the sort of emphasis on being outdoors that I was used to, it just didn't seem to exist. And it bothered me, because knowing of all the benefits of outdoor play, I was worried that my daughters weren't going to have the opportunities for outdoor play that I had as a child. Mm-hmm. And I was worried about the effects that might have on them. So I did what I could to sort of compensate, and I fell back on my own upbringing and the friluftsliv culture, the open air culture of the Nordic countries, mostly through simple outdoor activities like foraging for berries or just going for a walk in the woods or even just a walk around your neighborhood. So knowing that, that's what I tried to do with my kids. So after they came back from daycare or preschool, that's what I would do. Like before they got to do any homework or anything like that, that was our first priority, to just get outside. And I try to work it into our daily rhythm. So maybe we would just like stop by the playground on our way home or go for a walk in town or things like that.
One thing that the Nordic countries do that I think most Americans would find shocking is that you guys have your babies take their naps outside. And even in like quite cold weather. You wrote that a Finnish study from 2008 says that the ideal napping temperature is 21 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
And I think, I've never seen anybody do that in America, but it's extremely common, right? Where you come from, does everybody leave their baby out on the porch, or how does it work?
I wouldn't say everybody, but I would say, it depends a little bit on where you live. So if you live in a big city and you don't have a balcony, then you wouldn't leave your stroller outside and then go up 10
Oh,
floors
okay.
and just leave your baby down there. But you would probably, I mean, you would still go for walks and bring your baby with you.
So did you do that when you were in Indiana?
In India, oh yeah, definitely. I mean, because this is something that we've done for generations, right?
Uh-huh.
So it's like deeply embedded into our culture. And I mean, it started back when mortality was rather high, and there was a Finnish pediatrician who suggested that you take babies outdoors for their naps, and that they need that fresh air, and that would help them ward off infection and so on.
Okay.
So that's where it started. And the fact is, there haven't been a lot of studies on it, but the one study that I quoted in my book, that one found that the babies take longer naps when they're outdoors, and the parents find that they're more alert after their naps, and that they also have better appetites after waking up. So it's not complicated, really. I mean, you just bundle them up. I mean, but not too heavily, just like you would sort of dress yourself, thinking, that if you were to nap outdoors. So you bundle them up and you take them out in the stroller, and you can either go for a walk or just, place them outside. And and then once they fall asleep, I lived in a very safe neighborhood. I just put a little baby monitor in the stroller, and I would go back indoors and work on dinner or whatever.
So
And
you
I
had
would,
put her like on the back porch or the front
yeah.
porch or something. So did you ever do it in public, and did anybody give you a hard time, like at a cafe or anything?
I think I did it once at a cafe, but it wasn't cold at the time, and I was sitting right inside. So yeah, nobody said anything. I know that I know that our mailman saw it at home a few times,
Okay.
but he never said anything either. And we lived in rural Indiana, so we didn't just have people walk by.
Right.
But I could see how I could see how some parents would be very worried about that, because it is a different culture in the
Right.
U.S. and there are people who would think that amounts to child abuse, and though it's proven to be healthy.
Yeah.
Looking at the Nordic countries, yeah, I mean, we have infant mortality rates are like the lowest in the world. So if there was any sign that it was dangerous to the child, I mean, nobody would do it here.
I have a friend whose mom grew up in Denmark, and she said she did that to her when she she grew up in New York. And she said, "Oh yeah, my mom would just sit me outside in the snow." and I think you had said you noticed with recess in America that it just either wasn't very long, or there's quite a few school districts in America that don't even have recess anymore, which I think is horrible. But what I found, I live in Colorado, and there's a cutoff of, I think it's 22 degrees or something, that they will not go outside for recess if it's below 22. And as you're pointing out, a lot of times we just don't dress for it in America.
Yeah.
Kids show up to school in tennis shoes and a light jacket, and they're not wearing these snow suits and everything that you guys have figured out in Sweden of how to dress for the weather. But it drives me crazy, because in our school, if they do indoor recess, they do free time on the Chromebook, or they show a movie or something. They don't actually get a break. They don't actually get exercise. And so how do you find the parents in Sweden, just their whole attitude towards outdoor time, recess? How was it different than some of the parents in America? Because I know a lot of the parents in America don't agree with me. They don't think it's a big deal.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a difference in attitudes. We really want our kids to be out in all types of weather, not just for their sort of day-to-day health, but also because we think it breeds a certain resiliency, if you will. And I've had my kids out like during the polar vortex in Indiana. I mean, and with the wind chill, the weatherman said it was going to be like -40 that day. I mean, we weren't outdoors for really long, but you really can't, like, if you're dressed for it, you can really be out in most conditions. So, but yeah, I know it's a really common problem that kids don't come with the right gear to school, and I think a
Hmm.
lot of that has to do with the expectations that the school sets and communication with the parents too. And I know this has been sort of sliding for the past couple decades, because I know just in my generation, I know from the conversations that I've had with teachers that kids used to be outdoors more, like
Hmm.
even during the winter, just a generation ago. And yeah, part of it is the gear, but I think part of it is also like litigation or fear of litigation. What I
Yeah.
heard from teachers when I interviewed them was that, well, if there's ice on the ground, there's the fear that somebody's gonna slip and hit their head, and then it's also inconvenient because if there's snow on the ground, then, well, they're gonna track that into the
Hmm.
school and it gets wet, and it's like a practical problem. But
Right.
all these issues can be solved, and I don't buy the fear of litigation, because most injuries, like when it comes to children and injuries at school, I mean, if they were worried about that, then there wouldn't be any school sports, right? Like
Yeah,
that's
that's
where
true.
kids get injured, but they can mitigate that. So surely they should be able to mitigate, injuries
That's a great
um,
point.
during recess as well. And also, if kids never get a chance to like experience these conditions, then they won't learn how to manage that risk.
Right.
They have
Yeah.
to be allowed to play on ice to learn how to not injure
True.
themselves on ice,
True.
I think. So, and also, I mean, I think it's just unfortunate that instead of doing what's best for the kids, we're doing what's easier or most practical. And in some cases, also what the parents want. I talked to one principal who told me, like, yeah, I'd love to send the kids out more, but if the parents see that the kids are outdoors and there's as much as a rain cloud in the sky, they will call us and complain that the
Ugh,
kids are getting rained on. And
so
so I
annoying.
think school administrators are also kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. So.
Yeah. Well, so what is the difference? Could you kind of explain what school looks like in Sweden, like preschool and elementary school, and how they're so different from our schools in the US?
Yeah, so the preschool in Sweden, well, for starters, it's subsidized by the government, and
Okay.
it's more like it's called educare because it's education, but it's also daycare for working parents. And over 90% of children in Sweden attend this preschool. So therefore, all children in Sweden sort of get a very similar start in life. And
Okay.
in the national curriculum for the preschool, because all preschools in Sweden have to follow like the same curriculum, in that curriculum, it specifically says that the children have a right to outdoor play, and both in sort of planned environments, which would be like a playground and so on, the
Hmm.
sandboxes, swings, and natural environments. So that means as a child growing up in Sweden, you actually have a right to connect with nature during preschool. And in like for the older kids, it gets a little less the older they get. But even during grade school, during recess, recess is always outdoors
Hmm.
essentially, and they have plenty of recess. About a fifth of the day is recess
Wow.
total of the total time. And even in high school, they have recess periods, and also special days are set aside when they focus on friluftsliv, which is, it could be going for a hike, or it could be riding bikes, going skiing,
Oh, fun.
um, yeah, things like that. So they're trying to really emphasize getting outdoors.
So, how do they do this if they're at a school in a city? How do they get more into nature?
Yeah, so when you go to a city in Sweden, you may see like a group of kids in high visibility vests with some adults walking around, and that's usually a group of preschool kids. So they take the kids outdoors to whatever nearby nature areas that they
Okay.
have. Most preschools in Sweden do have a yard. I would say probably all of them do, because since the curriculum kind of requires that. But they also take them to nearby parks, either by walking, or they also take the bus sometimes. So they'll like ride on public transit or the tube too. So you just use what you have. And
Okay.
yeah.
And when they're outside, is it all just free play, do what you want, make up your own games? Is it ever directed by the teachers?
It is free play.
Okay.
Sometimes they would go, like if they would go to the woods, for example, like at preschool, the teacher might, suggest some, some invitations to play, and there might be some activities, but there's consensus in Sweden, I think, both among parents and educators, that play is really essential to childhood.
Mm-hmm.
So we just kind of view, like, especially the early years, like until a child turns 7 or so, we really feel like that is a sacred period where they just need to learn how to be in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, the best way to do that is through play. It doesn't mean that they're not learning. It just means that the focus is more on experiential learning.
Mm-hmm.
So learning by doing and directing your own play. So it may be that they start tracing letters in the sand, in the sandbox,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe they start doing maths while playing kiosk. But it's all happening organically, so there
what
are
is
no
kiosk. What is that?
Kiosk, like playing grocery store or whatever.
Oh, okay,
Okay.
okay.
Yeah.
Counting different things and having to
Yes,
do
exactly.
money and okay.
Having like pretend money and things like that. But there is no, like in Swedish preschool, there's no sitting down and doing wall words, tracing letters,
Okay, yeah.
like worksheets, and there's definitely no homework. That was a big change too for me when my kids started preschool in Indiana, and my 4-year-old was getting homework. I was
Seriously?
shocked. Yes.
Oh, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Oh man.
But there was just this pressure, this perceived pressure. And the preschool teachers even told me that. I mean, it was a play-based preschool, but still everybody was very anxious about actually letting the kids play. So instead of free play, there was centers so that the kids would rotate, so they would have like a limited time. And then all of a sudden, maybe just as they were starting to get into the play schema, then, now it's time to change. Now you got to rotate.
So it was playful, but it was not free play.
Right. And partly because there was a lot of pressure about like kindergarten readiness, which was another concept that was completely new to me, because we just don't have that sort of pressure here to push kids towards certain academic milestones that early. If they can read by the time they start school at 7, great. If they can't, well, now is the time for them to learn, right? Nobody is stressed out, like stressed out if their kid isn't reading by age 7. It's just not that big a deal.
And so they don't really start elementary school until 7?
Right. There's a preparatory year before that. So in Sweden, which is mandatory. So now they start at 6, but that first year is also very much play-based.
And you had pointed out no employer is ever going to ask or know, did you learn to read when you were 5 or did you learn to read when you were 7? It's just not going to matter down the road.
Right.
And
exactly.
It just is like less pressure on the kids when they're younger, gives them more area and time and space to just play and learn all these other things.
Yeah.
I think it would be one thing if Sweden and the Scandinavian countries were doing it like this and they were just at the bottom of the barrel. They just had terrible scores, but they are consistently at the top of the IQ scores, at the, all these different metrics of of measuring how well they're doing in school. And it tends to be like Asian countries, maybe 1, 2, and 3. And then, Denmark, Finland, Sweden are right at the top. So it's obviously working.
Yeah.
There is something to this. And I mean, it seems like America is so obsessed with quote unquote beating China. And yet our scores are so much lower, not only than China, but than all of Scandinavia. So I just wonder if we would just shed this anxiety and start doing things the way you guys are and take a little more time to develop these quote unquote soft skills and relationship skills with kids and play and less worksheets and stuff, we would probably go up in the rankings, I would think.
Well, there are a lot of different rankings, and I know that Sweden has slid in the rankings in terms of the PISA ratings that are done. But when you look at the happiness index and things like that,
true.
as the Nordic countries are always in the top, and I think just having that sort of foundation of a play-based childhood, I think that really makes for a lot of happy adults. The US is very competitive. It's much more competitive than the Nordic countries. Here we emphasize cooperation a lot more and the collective. So that is a big cultural difference, and it's hard to say like how things would work out if you take something that is very typical for one culture and you sort of implement it in a different one. But I do think that the US would probably benefit from being less competitive, or at least not let that competitiveness trickle down to the youngest children, because childhood is such a short window of time in your life. When's the next time going to be that you can just be and jump in puddles just because of the fun of it? There's just so much learning that children should be able to do before you ever put a pencil in their hand. I mean, they should just be out there feeling the mud, sinking their hands deep in the mud and just experience rain on their forehead and digging holes to china and tumble and play. And, they need to know how their bodies work. They need to know how to be in the world. And those are big, big things.
It sounds to me like it's a very different philosophy in Sweden. Like, how do they think about getting dirty, playing in the mud? What's the viewpoint on that in childhood?
It's almost like a badge of honor. It's almost like if you don't come home with stained clothes, you didn't do it right. Like, you haven't played hard enough. So I think our philosophy has always just been that like clothes can be washed and so can kids. So just let them play.
Yeah. And in terms of getting dirty, I thought this was fascinating that in your book you said that it's really, truly, literally good for kids because there's a microbe in it. I don't know how to pronounce it. Vaccae,
yeah.
That actually
Mycobacterium vaccae, I think. It's Latin, but I think
actually triggers serotonin and can improve cognitive functions, including learning.
Yeah, and I think working memory can improve working memory too, and that's why they call it the gardener's high, because I think people who garden a lot often say that it's their happy space, right? When they get to dig their hands in the soil. And
because they're really actually getting more serotonin
literally
from this microbe,
getting infused with the happy hormones. Yeah.
Wow, it's just so cool, and it's just so easy. Just go outside.
It is. It is. I think a lot of times we look towards tech to solve our problems, but I think a lot of times you just have to take a step back and do less. There's a lot of talk about like intensive parenting right now. And that is a big difference, I would say, too, between parenting in the Nordic countries and the U.S. We actually don't even have a word for parenting. It's not a
Parenting.
verb. And it didn't used to be in the English language either. I mean, that's pretty recent that we started using parenting as something that you would do rather than just as being a parent. And so it says a lot about sort of the attitude towards the act of being a parent, I think, that you try to sculpt the child, and it starts with, these intensive preschools and like really pushing the academics and also scheduling a lot of activities, like a lot of after school activities to make sure that the child is busy. And I know people, like parents, do it with good intentions. It's not like, I'm not here to knock on parents. Absolutely not. And like I said, it is part of the culture, this competitiveness. I'm just here to say that there is another way, and that you can be successful even with a much simpler childhood, one that is not as intensive in terms of all the academics and activities, but one that is just rooted in free play. I mean, there are so many people who are examples of that. I mean, just look at the couple of generations ago, or like Steve Jobs, for example.
Yep.
I mean, he didn't have any tech when he was a little kid, right?
Bill Gates, I read his book, and his childhood was full of hiking and being outside in Washington and playing cards and playing games, and just, he really actually had very little tech until he got to junior high and started coding, and that was a very, very new thing. Yeah. But, and so in Sweden, is it just very few after school activities? Like, what's their thought about extracurriculars?
I'd say it's a lot less than in the US. It's starting to become a little more common, but definitely for older kids. And for a lot of parents that I've talked to, I mean, it's almost like, I don't want to say it's selfish, but it is like conscious decision, because you don't want to be reduced to just a chauffeur when the kids are just 3 or 4 years old, and to have them being busy 3 or 4 nights a week. And then if you have several kids, well, then all of a sudden you have an Excel sheet with like a spreadsheet of different activities, and you're trying, and you wonder why you're always tired and frazzled, and you can't get your family life to to work out. And I think so for a lot of families, it's just a matter of choosing like a slower lifestyle. And once the kids are old enough to ask for an activity, that's when they get to go. That's what I did with my kids. If there was something that they specifically wanted to do, then fine. But I didn't put them in anything before that.
Were they when they first started asking for those?
Maybe 6.
Okay.
It's been a while now, so I can't quite remember, but yeah.
Because I think you were mentioning basically all you guys were doing was maybe some swim lessons, and
swim lessons is one thing, because that's a survival skill in my book, and we do spend a lot of time on and by the water, so that's one that wasn't optional. And I think part of it is also that we recognize the value of occasional boredom. I always say that boredom is the mother of creativity, because it really is. I think kids need to have that downtime to just have time to come up with things, come up with new ideas and just,
absolutely.
Be creative.
You had a quote from a Danish therapist, and he said, let's see, is it Jesper?
Jesper Juhl,
And so he said, when your child says that he's bored, hug him and say, good luck, my friend. I look forward to seeing what you get up to.
I love that quote.
That's so great, because it's like, I'm not going to solve it for you. I'm not your activities director. You go figure it out on your own, and you will come up with something.
Yeah. And I think today it's even more important, because with the rise of digital entertainment and all these devices that kids have today, again, I think we have to be very intentional about creating space, creating those empty spaces in their lives, creating space that when they're not constantly just getting these dopamine fixes. Because once they get used to that, then it becomes almost impossible for them to come up with anything on their own. I mean, I can often tell when I see kids who are used to playing outdoors and have been since they were little versus kids who have spent almost all their time on screens. It's like they don't know what to do with themselves once you put them in a forest. It's like, well, why don't you go climb some trees or, lift some rocks up and see what you can find underneath. But they don't have a concept of that because they haven't been doing it regularly. And so unfortunately, nature is more of a slow experience. Not unfortunately, but unfortunately, it makes it hard for nature to compete with this sort of the fast experiences that kids find online and through games and social media. And
well, I am curious about how tech is influencing things in Sweden, because at the end of your book, you spent 6 months visiting Sweden and then you moved back to Indiana. However, I am speaking to you right now in Sweden. So obviously you moved back at some point. Why did you decide to go permanently back to Sweden?
Yeah, it was a decision that sort of came over time, but after spending 6 months here, I felt very strongly that I wanted to give my kids a chance to experience that kind of childhood too. It was hard for me, no matter how much I tried to create that in Indiana, just because I didn't really have a community. I was doing what I could by myself at home, but it was a little hard to sort of, to get that. I wasn't going to get that whole culture. So, and then it was also just wanting to be closer to family. So we moved back, about a year and a half after we came back from those 6 months, we moved permanently. Yeah.
I mean, you did say, we do need to find our own community because it is very much like a village type thing.
It is, yes.
I mean, for those of us in the U.S. who are kind of fighting against the grain, do you have any suggestions of how do we find our tribe of people that are like-minded that will want to have the kids out in the backyard and in the streets and riding bikes?
Yeah. I do think it's easier today, and thanks to tech, actually, it's not all bad. I mean, when I had my first daughter, I had basically just signed up for Facebook, and I didn't I wasn't very savvy with creating community online. That sort of came later, but I think today there's a lot that you can do, and not just connect online, but do connect with your neighbors, just the people living on your street. I do think it's really important to get that back, because what we're seeing is that kids don't like being outdoors when there are no other kids there. They like to be where the other kids are, and that was one of my problems. In the U.S., we'd go to the playground and we'd be the only people there, whereas here in Sweden, the other kids were outdoors too. So we need to sort of create that pull effect to get the kids outdoors. I mean, there are a lot of different initiatives that I've seen, for example, in some cities where residents have asked to have streets closed off, maybe an afternoon every week or once a month or something like that, where they turn a regular street into a play area where all the kids can just go out and kick balls around and ride their bikes without the fear of getting hit by a car and things like that. I think, you mentioned creating a community or a village. Yeah, I always say that it takes a village to raise an outdoor loving child. And I do believe that we need, to connect with other parents. Maybe there will be some parents that would be interested in starting a nature play group that meets once a week, something like that. But make it simple, and also do limit the tech. I've seen examples here now in Sweden because there's been a backlash here now with the tech. We've always been very early adopters here of tech, always very progressive, and so on. And the downside being that I think we let it go too far with the kids.
Yeah, technology and phones and social media affected that sort of outdoor life philosophy.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has affected it, and it hasn't been good. Even in the years that have passed since I researched and wrote my book, I think there's been a big change. Digital devices even crept into the national curriculum for the preschool, where it mandated that preschool kids should be exposed to like digital technology.
Wow.
Well, now there's been, with all the new research that's come out on the negative effects, the government is making a U-turn. So turning back the clock, erasing that out of the national curriculum for the preschool.
Great.
And actually, the government has, for the first time, issued screen time recommendations for children. And like I said, it's been a U-turn, and I've also seen a greater awareness among parents. So in some communities, the parents go together and they've created like pledges. Like the parents sign a pledge that they will not give their child a smartphone until they turn 14, for example.
Great.
And then, because that's the other issue with tech, is that when all the other kids have it, then you become the outlier who doesn't allow it for your kid. And then nobody wants their kid to be left out or ostracized. I mean, that's the worst thing that you can even imagine as a parent for your child. So we're seeing these different initiatives now where parents actually say, hey, we want to protect our children's childhood, and we're signing this pledge to delay the introduction of smartphones. And I think those are great initiatives, and I think we need more of that. I think that's part of the path forward, because we can't literally turn back the clock on I mean, smartphones are still going to be out there, but I think we need to keep them out of our hands, keep them out of the hands of our children for as long as possible.
I'm impressed that the government did a U-turn, because a lot of times once it's set in stone here, it's extremely hard for the government to change things, and they don't like to say that they were wrong or that they made a mistake. They just double down on it. So good for them for saying there's new research and we're going to do what the research tells us. And and so that's great to hear. And I was really wondering kind of how it has affected everything. And it sounds like it affected Sweden just the way it's affecting us. Yeah. But you guys are realizing that you have to put some guardrails in. Right.
And we're seeing it all over the world now. I mean, Australia, I think, is the first country to put age limits on social media. And I think others will follow. And it's affected my personal parenting too. I mean, in hindsight, I would have done a lot of things differently. I feel like I was too lenient, but I got stuck in that trap too, with, fearing that my kids were going to be left outside. And I was like the last holdout in my daughter's, for my daughter to get Snapchat in her class. But, once the whole class has their little chat group and your kid is the only one who's not in it, well, that's really hard.
So have you changed your personal rules around tech with your girls? Because now they're teenagers, right?
They're teenagers. My oldest is almost 18. So at this point, she is on her own, but we talk about it a lot. Like, we do communicate about like what's healthy, and we always have the friluftsliv lifestyle to balance things out. So I feel like, well, if you're outdoors and you go for a walk or you go for a run in the forest and then you come back, well, then I think it's fine with some screen time. But we do talk a lot about like definitely having the phone off at night. A lot of teens are getting notifications like through the night. They're not getting enough sleep. I've always been very strict about that. And we have we have, clear rules about no phones at the dinner table and so on. And when we go on family vacations, we, like the whole family, sometimes we'll just put away our phones and do
That's
like
nice.
a day, like completely screen free. But then with our younger, I'm remarried and I have 2 bonus daughters and they are only 8 and 12. And with them, they're getting the even stricter rules now. So my husband is saying no social media until they're 18.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Good for him.
Yeah. And he's very, very firm on that. And they also have very strict limits in terms of screen time and which apps that they're allowed to use. So they're not allowed even to use YouTube or any of those apps that sort of create an incessant, feed of just feeding the kids videos so that they get stuck scrolling.
Well, like we were saying, the research shows what's going on, so might as well change your behavior to match what we're learning about the detriments. So I'm guessing you had quite an independent, fun, outdoorsy childhood. And the last question I love to ask everybody is about independence, because I think that's the other side of this coin is we limit the screens, but we try to give them that other side of more play, more outdoors, more independence and responsibility. So what's your favorite memory from your childhood of being completely on your own and your parents letting you do something by yourself?
Well, I have a core memory of being in the woods with my 2 cousins. And I tell this story in my book too. And we get on a trail, like we would be out in the woods playing all the time. So that wasn't unusual. But we decided to go on a little hike. And, the only problem was we took the wrong trail. There were like 3 different trails. And we thought that the green trail was the short one. Well, it turns out that was the 6-mile long trail.
Whoa. How old do you think you were?
Oh, I think I was about, I don't know, 8 or 9 maybe. And my cousins were like then 7 and 11, something like that. So we get walking and we walk and eventually we figure out that this isn't right. Like we've walked way too far. And so we start getting a little bit worried and we're thinking, what are we going to do? We're going to turn back? Well, that's an awful long way to walk back. And so we just ended up obviously there were no cell phones back then. So you had to think, okay, well, what can we do? Well, we eventually got to a house, so we just knocked on the door, and there was an old couple that lived there, and they let us use their phone, and we called my dad, or if it was my cousin's dad, and asked if he could come pick us up. And yeah, of course he did. We didn't get yelled at or anything. In fact, I don't even think they had noticed that we were gone. So that's just how it was back then. Our parents didn't worry. We'd come back in when it got dark or when dinner was ready. So
well, that was pretty good problem solving.
Yeah.
You didn't just wither away in the woods. You thought, how are we going to get out of this?
Right.
Wow, that's fun. And that's pretty different than now. I think not many parents would let that happen, and they would certainly notice that they had been gone for a while.
Yeah, and they're probably tracking them so they can tell exactly to the exact coordinate where they are. So it's one of the memories that stuck with me. I think because it was thrilling and a little bit scary at the same time. But we figured out what to do, and we came home unscathed. And I think that really helps build confidence and resilience. So
Absolutely.
I think it was all for the better.
Fun. Well, thank you so much for sharing your time with us and giving
you.
us an insight into just a little bit of a different way of parenting. So thank you so much, Linda.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
If you'd like to hear more from this interview, head over to Apple and become a subscriber. As a subscriber, you'll get early access to episodes from Screen Less, Play More, bonus materials, and my book bites, where I do a quick synopsis of books that I find really great, because I know you don't have time to read an entire book, so I will tell you all about it. Head over to Apple and become a subscriber today. And remember, you can always find more information and articles on screenlessplaymore.com or my Substack, also called Screen Less Play More. Thank you so much for listening.